This is an eye that grew under my fingernail. This is a real medical mystery that stumped doctors for years. It was painful, pus-filled, and wouldn't stop growing. And it's something you should never see in your life. But how did it even happen? When something is wrong with my nails, I always go to my local doctor, who is also a friend of mine. I go to him because he has a good sense of humor, even though his explanations can be a bit oversimplified sometimes. That time I had an ingrown toenail. He told me to just pull it out myself, which I did. So when I noticed something was wrong with my fingernails, I knew I could count on him. It was one morning during my shower that I first noticed my nail looked weird. Couldn't quite put my finger on it, but there was definitely something off about my thumbnail. At first I thought maybe I'd injured it somehow, or maybe it was just a little bruised. It wasn't very painful, so I figured it would probably heal up in a few days. But when I went to wash my hands later on, I saw that it was getting worse. The entire nail bed looked inflamed and discolored. And what was that black thing stuck under my nail? It didn't look like a piece of dirt. I tried to pick it out, but it wouldn't come off. And then I saw another small piece at the edge of my nail. It almost looked like a bloodshot eyeball staring back at me. Now I was freaking out. I went straight to the doctor, who had no idea what it was. He took some x-rays and told me to come back in a few weeks so he could drain the pus and take a closer look. How does something get stuck under your nail? And why does it keep coming back after you pull it out? There was only one thing on my mind the entire time I was waiting for the doctor to figure out what was wrong with my finger. The answer was both horrifying and ridiculous. Finally, the day came that my doctor took me out of suspense and told me what he thought it was. What I saw made me feel like I was in a horror movie. That black thing that I had seen staring back at me was actually a lens. A tiny little eye was growing underneath my nail. How did this happen? Well, that's something nobody could answer. But he had a theory. About 20 years earlier, a boy had come into the clinic with a similar problem. In that case, it was his big toe. After several failed attempts to remove the growth, they sent a sample off to the pathology department. When the results came back, they were stunned. The doctors believed that the eye had been there since birth, but it hadn't grown large enough to be noticed until the boy was much older. Either way, it wasn't dangerous, but they removed it anyway. My case was different, however, because I didn't have the entire eye. The lens was under my nail, but the rest of it was still inside my finger. Is it possible for this thing to just grow out of nowhere? Well, yes it is. If you think about it, our eyes are basically just sacs filled with jelly. Doctors don't know exactly what causes these mysterious growths, but they do know that it's usually caused by a mutation. That means if you're born with an extra eye, it doesn't show up right away. You won't even know you have it until it starts growing out of control. By this point, you're probably wondering how something like this can even be possible. Our bodies have very strict rules when it comes to things like this. For example, we all have a brainstem that connects our brain to the rest of our body. We use this structure to breathe, eat, and move around. But what happens if someone accidentally damages their brainstem? You might be surprised to learn that most people survive it without any lasting effects. This refers to our body's ability to change and adapt in response to injuries. If you damage part of your brain, the parts that are connected to the damaged area will eventually start connecting with other parts of the brain instead. This means that even if a part of your brain gets damaged, it'll be able to keep functioning like normal. So, is it possible to have an extra eye? Well, yes it is. You might have an eye growing underneath your skin right now and you won't even know it. The reason you do and have 3 eyes sticking out of your face is because of something called apoptosis. This is programmed cell death. If you have an extra eye growing under your skin, those cells will die before they have a chance to develop into anything. That means you'll never have to worry about having an extra eye poking out of your head. But what happens if those cells manage to survive? Well, that's exactly what happened to me. I have no idea why my extra eye started growing out of control, but it's definitely not something you want to mess with. As soon as my doctor saw the x-ray, he knew what he had to do. He explained to me that he had 2 options. The first was to cut off my nail and remove the eye. But this would leave behind a gaping hole where my nail used to be. It would also leave me without a nail for the foreseeable future, which would make it hard to do anything. My second option was to close the gap between my nail and the eye. This would give the eye nowhere to go but down, hopefully into my finger. But this was risky because it could damage the nail bed and cause permanent damage. Since neither of the options sounded very appealing, I decided to go with option no. 3. I let the eye keep growing until my next appointment. At this point, it was so big that it had pushed my nail out of the way and was visible under my skin. But finally, the day had come that my doctor could take a look at it. He numbed my finger and made an incision into my nail bed. To my surprise, it wasn't very deep. He then reached in and extracted the lens of my eye. And what a weird feeling that was. I could feel my doctor digging around in my finger, trying to find the eye. It was almost like he was searching for a lost treasure. Finally, he pulled it out and I saw it sitting on the table in front of me. It was kind of like looking into the eye of the needle. It was perfectly round and shiny like a marble. The doctor then closed up my wound and sent the eye off to pathology. As soon as he did this, I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders. Even though I didn't have my finger for long, at least I knew that whatever it was had been removed. Now, whenever I feel like something is wrong with my finger, all I have to do is look at the bandage and remember that I once had an eye growing underneath my nail. Thanks for watching. Be sure to share this video with your friends. And don't forget to subscribe so you're the first to know when we release new videos.